Hello and welcome to Spinster's Library. I'm Claudia and today we are looking at some vintage and some recent covers for Jane Eyre by Charlotte Bronte. I did a video a while back where I looked at some truly horrendous covers for the picture of Dorian Gray through the decades, and today I want to do a similar thing for Jane Eyre. There will be spoilers for the novel Jane Eyre, so I recommend if you haven't read the book, then you probably shouldn't be watching this video because we are not going to be holding back with the plot of Jane Eyre. So we're going to look at some Jane Eyre covers through the decades, and then at the end I also want to show you some international editions of the past and present, because we know that if there's one thing you really should judge a book by, it's the cover. This first one is from 1895, and I found that really interesting because a lot of the time when you look at 19th century book covers, there isn't really much there. They're just plain, there's no real design. This one looks quite pretty. It says Jane Eyre there. It doesn't say who wrote it. It's quite generic as far as design goes. It's very pretty, don't get me wrong. It's very, very beautiful. But I don't see how this design of, I want to say grapes, but honestly those leaves look like tomato leaves, how that relates at all to Jane Eyre. But you know what? It would be really bloody gorgeous on my shelf. Let's move forwards a few decades. And this is an absolutely iconic cover design for the 1943 Random House edition. And this is illustrated, so both the cover and the book itself illustrated by Fritz Eichenberg, a German in exile in the US at the time. Look at that. I mean, isn't that absolutely stunning? Look at the sheer gloom, the sheer misery that's coming off this image. This clearly shows a scene from the Lowood school that Jane attends. I love that you can't pick her out here. You don't know which one she is because these girls look the same. They're dressed the same in their school uniform. They look absolutely miserable because they are not being treated well by the schoolmasters. This is such an evocative title. This is so beautiful. We are starting strong here. We are starting strong. The other cover designers have a lot to live up to. Let's move on to this 1952 cover. Well, this shows Jane and Rochester presumably going up into old Bertha's apartment on the third floor. I think it's the third floor. It's always mistaken as her being the mad woman in the attic, but I don't think she actually, that's neither here nor there. I'm trying to think of nice things to say about this. It certainly conveys a sense of suspense, I guess. Let's leave it at that. The next one is from 1960, and I actually love this. I like the more stylized designs, I think, and the way that the dark black shapes take up space on this cover. There's Jane, presumably at the front, looking wistfully at the reader, and then right behind we see Mr. Rochester on his horse, about to fall off it. This 1962 Scholastic edition has got that very same scene on it, where Jane is walking and Mr. Rochester and his horse get a bit spooked. It's fine, it does the job. Now this is interesting. This is from 1963, and here I expect what we're looking at is not Jane, but Bertha, holding a candle, looking at us from the darkness. And this is more of a gothic cover, I guess. It's interesting to see through the decades how many of the books try and portray Jane Eyre as a romance versus how many of the books portray it as a gothic or even a horror novel. This one is definitely on the horror side of the spectrum. Here we have a 1965 Harper edition. Presumably that's Jane and Rochester, but honestly this is both generic and aesthetically displeasing. I do not like it. This 1967 Dean and Sons edition, on the other hand, is so far into the camp that I actually love it. I'm guessing what we're looking at here is Mr. Rochester's ward in the centre. She's crying. Maybe that's young Jane. I don't really know. And then looking at her or past her at no one is Rochester and Jane. I kind of like this Rochester because he looks like he's described in the book. Like that's kind of how I picture him when I read the descriptions of him. He's not described as a handsome man. I love this. This cover gives you a sense of drama. It gives you a sense of sorrow and a sense of something happening. Interesting to put the girl at the center of this. You know what? Maybe this is... Oh my God, I've just had the epiphany. Of course, it's Jane in the center in the red room, huh? Yeah, that's why the cover is red, isn't it? I think we've cracked it. This edition from 1967 just has some random lady, girl, looking at me. Very nothingy. Bit disappointing. I have no idea what's going on in this 1971 Norton edition, because on the one hand we see a stately home in the background, and then there is this portrait of presumably Jane. You can tell by the stern middle part, just sort of slapped in the middle of it. Not a fan, very odd. This 1983 edition is interesting in its nothingness. It just shows a living room with some people in it. It could be the cover for literally any classic ever written. This 1991 Tuttle edition of the book shows a gloomy woman in a cap holding a big book under her arm. And she looks like she is suffering. So I guess in that regard, it's pretty spot on. It's pretty accurate to the book. Is it interesting? I don't think so. We have our first, but certainly not our last, Wordsworth Classics edition. Wordsworth Classics, notorious for consistently producing the worst classics covers ever. I think this is pretty par for the course. It's not the worst, it's not the most horrendous. It shows a woman being wooed by a man who's easily twice her size if he stands up. I shouldn't talk, I am 5 foot tall. You can tell that's Jane there because of the stern middle part, and you can tell that's Rochester there because of the enormous sideburns. Double Wordsworth Classics. This is also from 1992, and this shows a different woman with a stern middle part holding a book. Are we sensing a theme here? This 1994 Penguin Popular Classics edition is like the blueprint for Penguin Popular Classics editions. All of them have got this weird sepia filter on them. All of them are just shades of beige and brown and yellow, and you can barely make out what's on there. So here it looks like we have a woman in a very elaborate dress mending a curtain, possibly Mr. Rochester's curtain after his bed burns down. I don't really know. I don't know why Jane is mending things anyway. She's a governess. I don't care for this sort of really low contrast look. I don't think it's particularly eye-catching. I don't think it's particularly inspired. I don't think it's particularly original. Unlike this 1994 Puffin Classics edition, which shows a woman in the most gorgeous cloak that I want desperately, looking into the distance at night. This cover, I think, is a decent mix of both the gothic and the romantic aspects of the book, because the way that she looks screams romantic heroine, but the way that she's placed with all that fog around, yeah, that's spooky, that's atmospheric, I'm into that. We're still in the 90s, this 1999 Puffin Classics edition. I don't know what to make of it. On the one hand, I like, again, the mix of the light and the dark. So we've got this randomly lime-coloured Georgian manor house, and a woman, presumably Jane Eyre, walking in front of it. But then you see the storm clouds. You see the crows fluttering around the tree. You get a sense of impending danger. And I quite like that. But aesthetically, those colours just aren't mine. This 1999 Wordsworth Classics is interesting because it screams Regency, of course. If I showed you this cover without the title and I asked you what do you think the title of this book is, I'm guessing 90% of you would say it's a Jane Austen novel because of the way that both the lady and the gentleman in the background are dressed. Now, the thing with Jane Eyre is it is actually set in the Regency. It's set in the early 19th century, even though it was published in the 1840s. I think nearer 1850, 1848, something like that. So, in a way, this is actually historically accurate. But when we think of Jane Eyre, we don't think Regency, we think Victorian. And so I'm not entirely sure what to make of this. Considering it is Wordsworth Classics, I'm just going to guess that any historical accuracy is purely accidental. And yet another Wordsworth Classics from 1999. This one is so gloriously bad. It's just like classic Wordsworth. They've done it again. We have a wedding bouquet in an empty church. I cannot explain to you how much I love this. Because, first of all, this references a very real scene when Mr. Rochester and Jane's wedding is so cruelly called off at the very last moment when they're already at the altar and Mr. Rochester is exposed to be a bigamist. And then the way that the church is in black and white and this very modern looking wedding bouquet is in mostly green on the ground with the rose petals falling off. The drama. Speaking of drama, we are in the new millennium and this is a 2001 cover that shows a moment that I didn't think would be so popular with cover artists, but turns out really is. And then it's the moment where Rochester falls off his horse, when he gets a little spooked by Jane. I don't know how this happens here because you could have seen her coming. Like, they're clearly just on a wide open plain. There's no reason for him to be surprised by her sudden presence there. This Jane wears a massive cloak and therefore I like. The severe middle part makes a return in this 2001 Oxford World Classics edition. I mean, this looks like the quintessential Jane, right? If you ask AI to draw a picture of Jane Eyre, that's probably what it would come out with. This is a 2004 Barnes & Noble Classics edition, and I cannot figure out whose hand this is. Because, like, is this someone's left hand, like, reaching for her? Or is this her own right hand doing this? Oh, we have a variant on the severe middle part because this Jane Eyre is in the process of doing her hair. And she doesn't look particularly pleased by it. Okay, so just like 2 covers ago, I made fun of a close-up of a grumpy-looking lady's face. But I kind of like this. Couldn't tell you why. Maybe the way that the picture is painted, how you can see the brush strokes. This is an Oxford University Press edition from 2008. We move into the era of vintage classics. They tend to do quite modern approaches to cover design, which I think are very hit and miss. This one I'm going to say is a hit. I like the texture of this red background, which looks like it's some sort of wood paneling. And I think the key adds an air of mystery. I gotta give them props for sort of trying to spice up the classics with their covers. I think even though when they fail really horribly, and I'm sure we'll see at least one example of that, when it works, it kind of works all right. It's not my preferred aesthetic, but it's effective. This is a 2009 Penguin edition. The illustrator Ruben Toledo is apparently a big deal. That's why I'm mentioning his name specifically. I don't know anything about cover designs. I don't know why I'm doing this video. I really should not be doing this. This reminds me a lot of that 1940s edition in terms of vibe. This gives off the atmosphere of a dark fairy tale, and it kind of works. This is another vintage classics edition, also from 2009. And see, this I think is less effective. What do you get from this other than that it's about a woman with slightly frazzled hair? This 2011 Puffin edition has a movie tie-in cover, and I'm just using that as a placeholder for all movie tie-in covers. I'm not a fan, though I am a fan of Jane's hair in this. Oh look, that's another movie tie-in cover from Vintage in 2011. They decided to go a bit weird with this one, so you can see Jane there in profile, and then I'm guessing Mr. Rochester sort of looking at you from her shoulder. This 2012 edition is stunning. I love this. I love the watercolor style. I love Jane's empty, dead eyes. I think this gives you a sense of creepiness as well as an idea of the darkness in the book. It's so eye-catching. You know, it's a dark cover that doesn't have to be all shades of black and grey. Here we have Alma Classic from 2014, and we are back in Regency land. It is technically historically accurate to place Jane Eyre in this period, but I think as far as book marketing goes, it gives you a wrong idea of what the book is about, because we associate the Regency period with Jane Austen, and Jane Eyre is nothing like Jane Austen's books. This 2016 Simon & Brown edition, I don't mind the cover design, the woman in profile, but it's so bland, it's so generic, and that font, I am fed up with that font, in particular for classics. This font is basically just saying, this is a romance for lady readers, which is not really accurate to the book. And we're back to vintage classics. This is a fairly safe classic cover in that it tells you nothing at all about the book, but it is pretty. This is the sort of cover that you don't mind looking at. Other than that, it very much blends into the background. And the exact same thing would be my critique for this 2017 Chiltern cover. I would love this as a wallpaper, actually. I think that would look very nice. But as a cover, it's underwhelming. So finally, I want to show you some international covers. This Arabic cover from 1998 is incredible. I don't know who these people are. There's this one young woman in the picture who looks nothing like how Jane Eyre is described and clearly belongs to the 20th century. Then there's like a sort of bodiless head floating above her and a grumpy silver fox type below her. Who are they? One of them must be Rochester. Who's the other guy? Maybe St. John? I don't know. It's hilarious that the top guy's entire forehead is just covered up by the title. They tried. I kind of like this beautifully cheesy cover from a Bengali edition from 2011. Here we have two women. One, presumably the bigger one, is Jane Eyre. And then I can only assume that the other one is either her friend Helen or her rival Blanche. Mr. Rochester, bless him, looks like a gentleman farmer in this, and I do not mean that as a compliment. This is a French edition from 1964, and the image looks like it might have been a sketch from Victorian times, maybe even a sketch of Charlotte Bronte, but for some reason they decided to really go for this soulless black eyes look. It's certainly eye-catching. This German cover from 1994 is so awful. Just let that sink in a little bit. The photograph, I was curious about this because it is obviously a photograph and a very old one. And apparently this is a photograph that was long mistaken to be of Charlotte Bronte herself. So whoever designed this in 1994 presumably thought this was Charlotte Bronte. It turns out it wasn't her, it was a friend of hers. But they added that and then decided to overlay it with some random symbols and words. I don't know what three-quarter wall means, and neither, I'd wager, does the designer of this cover. German book cover designers have not covered themselves in glory. They tend to be either awful or bland. And we have another German one here, and this one is both bland and historically inaccurate in a way that does bother me, because Jane Eyre, as we've established, was published in the 1840s, but is set a few decades before then. But the woman in this cover clearly belongs to the very end of the 19th century, at the start of the 20th century. This is giving Edwardian, and I don't like that level of carelessness on the part of the designer. Here we have another German edition. I don't have a lot to say about this, but I really like her hair. I kind of love this Greek edition from 2017 because it makes Jane look angry. This is a woman with the fury of ages inside her, and she can only let it out when she's looking away from Mr. Rochester. She looks like she wants to murder that man. And you know what? Good on her. Here we have a Hebrew edition from 2007, and this looks like a sort of travel guide to like a Swiss castle or something like that. This does not look like the cover for a novel. This would not entice me to buy the book, I have to say, because it just looks happy and idyllic and like nothing bad is going to happen in this pretty little village hidden away in the mountains. Whereas this Hungarian cover from 1986 doesn't look like a travel guide to a Swiss mountain village. It looks like a sort of guide of medieval castle ruins. Very, very odd choice. Right, this is my absolute favourite of the foreign language editions. This is the Italian version from 1968. I love it. It's so stunningly 60s. Just look at that eye makeup, look at the eyebrows, look at the lip colour, the heavy black eyelashes and mascara. It just screams Italian. I think if you didn't tell me what edition this was, I would have said this is so clearly Italian. The aesthetic is all there. I love it. And here, just to prove that the Italian aesthetic is a thing, this is also an Italian cover from 2006 this time, where they've just straight up disregarded the period, not even tried to make it look like there's anything Victorian about this. And they've just got this like Black Widow looking lady with some very heavy fake eyelashes and some very bright red lipstick on there. Just do not care at all about historical accuracy as long as it looks good. That's Italy for you. This Polish edition from 1998 is really nice. I really like this. I like it aesthetically. I like the motif of a woman placing the flowers but turning to look at the reader. And I like the sense of melancholy that you get from this cover. This Romanian cover from 2016 is lazy and nothingy. And I cannot believe someone actually got paid for this. This is a Russian cover from 1989. I quite like it. Again, we have a motif we've seen several times before, and that is Jane with the house in the background. And she is looking away, she's not happy, she is slightly terrified of what's going on inside that house. I think this conveys it very well, and it's also artistically interesting. I enjoy looking at this. I like the textures in this, and I like the contrast between the stormy, yellowy, grey sky and then the somber, dark dress of Jane. This is a 1964 cover from Slovakia, and I love how big this guy's top hat is. That's the only reason why I've got it in this. It's certainly evoking romance rather than gothic. But yeah, mostly just look at this guy's hat. Look at it. It's enormous. Another cover from Slovakia. This one is from 1985. This is so good. I really like this. This is giving the right amount of creepiness. Jane in this picture looks like she has truly seen it all. The despair coming off this. At the same time, it's just gorgeous when those shades of grey and white and black with the title in pink. Yeah, I'm into this. I think this is great. This Spanish edition from 2011 is a familiar theme of sad woman looking away from you. It's fine, but it's not very interesting. So, as you can tell, there are certain conventions that we see over and over and over again. But overall, I think it's interesting to see this variety of cover designs for Jane Eyre. Jane Eyre, I feel like, has been marketed in so many different ways to so many different people. It's been clearly marketed as a romance, it's been marketed as a horror novel, it's been marketed as a Regency novel, and it's been marketed as a Victorian novel. And I guess it makes sense because it is a book with all of these influences. My favorite covers tend to be the ones that lean into the darkness of it, into the gothic horror aspect of it, and just the gloominess of it. It's overall a very gloomy book. Even the happy bits aren't that cheerful, and I think having that dark atmosphere on the cover is a fair warning to the reader that Jane Austen, this is not. So let me know what your favourite covers were here. By the way, there are so many covers for Jane Eyre. This book has been printed and reprinted again. This doesn't even touch the surface of the amount of covers I found online. And yeah, I'm curious to see if you have a cover that stands out. Do tell me about what edition it is. I enjoy looking these up. And which ones of these you enjoyed and which ones you were absolutely horrified by. Thank you for watching. Bye.